Hey, good evening. This is going to be a little bit of a long one because it's a 54-minute video, and it's Eleanor Hill giving a statement. Eleanor Hill is the staff director for the Joint Intelligence Inquiry into the attacks of September 11, 2001, headed by the Joint House and Senate committees. So it's a 54-minute video with me giving some additional thoughts in the video. Let's see what happens.
Good morning, Ms. Hill. We welcome you,
Good morning.
and the floor is yours.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, at our last hearing last week,
Actually, I want to make sure the sound is not.
intelligence community had available prior to September 11th, 2001, regarding the September 11th hijackers. Today, as the chairman has alluded to, I will discuss two additional topics. First, the July 10th, 2001 electronic communication, or EC, from the FBI's Phoenix field office to FBI headquarters, also known as the Phoenix Memo, or in this statement as the Phoenix EC, and the investigation prior to September 11th, 2001 of Zacarias Moussaoui. As mentioned last week, I want to again emphasize the significance of these areas, not just individually, but also, perhaps more importantly, when viewed collectively. Information regarding all three areas was available in the same section at the Federal Bureau of Investigation's headquarters in late August 2001. Two of these areas were addressed in the Director of Central Intelligence's Counter-Terrorist Center at approximately the same time. Yet, no one apparently saw the potential collective significance of the information, despite the increasing concerns throughout the summer of 2001 about an impending terrorist attack. I'm first going to discuss the Phoenix electronic.
Which, by the way, should make you wonder, right? The argument between those in the 9/11 truth movement and debunkers is that with the truthers, they say, well, there wasn't much information. With debunkers, there was information. But in reality, we had a lot of information about an impending attack. And that's the real conspiracy, is that nobody ensured security at airports, at immigration, and the safety of the airline industry regarding cockpit doors, for example. Even though these warnings were prominent in the spring and summer of 2001. But, and I've repeated this ad nauseum, going as far back as 96, when it was known through the Bajinka plot dossier run by the Philippines investigators, such as lead investigator Rodolfo Mendoza, who broke the investigation and interrogated one of the plotters, Abdul Hakim Arad, in which wanted to bomb 12 airliners, and that there was a separate plot to hijack airliners and crash them into 10 or 11 American targets. And Abdul Hakim Arad said this was the secret part of the Bajinka plot that wasn't really known much, but it was found out through Ramzi Yousef's computer, which was retrieved by local authorities, that there were indeed a number of targets that were named in the computer regarding the Bajinka plot, which was corroborated by Abdul Hakim Arad. So what did the FBI do with it? Well, according to them, they shared it with White House principals and other investigators. And what happened? Nothing.
Communication. The FBI special agent in Phoenix, who I am told will be here testifying later this morning, who wrote the EC, told the Joint Inquiry staff that he first became concerned about aviation-related terrorism in the early 1990s. He was working on two cases in which Libyans with suspected terrorist ties were working for U.S. aviation companies. In addition, several bin Laden operatives had lived and traveled to the Phoenix area in the past, including a bin Laden lieutenant convicted for his role in the 1998 embassy bombings.
Okay, now I want to make something clear. That's Wadi al-Hajj he's talking about. by the way, Hani Hanjour, the alleged hijacker pilot of Flight 77, had went to the University of Arizona in 1992 to study electrical engineering. Now, we really don't know much about his plans back then, but he wasn't a terrorist back then, nor was he really radicalized back then.
The Phoenix agent believes that that individual established an Osama bin Laden support network in Arizona while he was living there, and that this network is still in place. In writing the EC, the Phoenix agent said he never imagined terrorists using airplanes as was done on September 11th. His primary concern was that Islamic extremists studying everything from aviation security to flying could be learning how to hijack or destroy aircraft and to evade airport security.
That was what Ken Williams, I've interviewed for my podcast. That was what Ken Williams tried to warn the FBI headquarters regarding an investigation into a militant named Zachariah Subra, who, by the way, was the memo's headliner. The Phoenix memo was about. They went and interviewed Subra months prior to the memo, and they found out that this guy basically said, he'd welcome any type of attack against the United States, and that he had even pictures of Osama bin Laden on his wall. So, I mean, he drafted this memo in July of 2001. It went to certain people, including New York, John O'Neill, and Robert Mueller, the FBI director, didn't know of its contents until after 9/11. Neither did George Bush, who, the president, didn't even know until the following year.
April 2000, the agent interviewed the individual who was to become the subject of the Phoenix EC. When he normally interviews young foreign nationals, he told us that they usually tend to be at least somewhat intimidated in their first contact with an FBI agent. By contrast, this individual told the agent directly that he considered the U.S. government and the U.S. military legitimate targets of Islam. In looking around the individual's apartment, the agent noticed a poster of bin Laden and another poster of wounded Chechnyan Mujahideen fighters.
Even Qatar.
He was also concerned by the fact that this individual was from a poor Middle Eastern country and had been studying a non-aviation related subject prior to his arrival in the United States. Another incident that increased the agent's suspicion about Middle Eastern flight students in the Phoenix area. During a physical surveillance of the subject of the Phoenix EC, the agent determined that he was using a vehicle registered to another individual. In 1999, the owner of the car and an associate of his were detained for trying to gain access to the cockpit of a commercial airliner on a domestic flight. They were released after an investigation. The FBI...
Yeah, this is an interesting story because the FBI claims that this was a dry run to 9/11. And I believe this involved a Delta Airlines plane, which I am not too certain that it was a a Delta Airlines plane. And a lot of people report on this in 2006 and 7, and basically trying to think of their names. Muhammad Al-Quddain, I'm probably saying his last name wrong, and Harun al-Shalawi. No, I'm sorry, Hamdan al-Shalawi. Right, these two guys were going to a Saudi embassy dinner in Washington, D.C. that was paid for by the Saudi government. And during the flight, they asked to go to the bathroom. And they were asking questions to the flight attendants. And the bathroom was in the back. And they went to the front. I think it was Al-Quddain that went to the front and basically tried to get into the cockpit. And she said, no, that's not the bathroom. And he did it again, a second time. So that's why when the FBI interviewed them and interviewed the flight attendants, they said that these guys were acting very strange throughout the flight. but they didn't realize, that, these are just Saudi tourists who don't know any better. But until after 9/11, red flags are raising. And the FBI claims that this was probably a dry run to the 9/11 attacks. Now, I believe it was Shalawi's car or Quiddiheem's car that was used that she's talking about here.
Closed the case, and the two
And that's
were
right.
not
Yeah. And by the
prosecuted.
way, just
A
like
year
the
later,
FBI
the individuals
after 9/11, because the FBI was involved with the cover up of 9/11 after, not before, but after, on orders of the State Department. But to the agents pre 9/11, there were a lot of people that tried to blow the whistle about, hey, we got radical militants inside the country, but nobody listened.
name was added to the State Department's watch list after intelligence information was received indicating that he may
Right.
have gotten explosive and car bomb training in Afghanistan. In August 2001, that same individual applied for a visa to re-enter the United States and, as a result of the watch listing, was denied entry. In May 2001, the Phoenix agent became increasingly concerned by the number of individuals of potential investigative interest enrolled in aviation training. At that point, he began to draft the EC, which focuses on 10 individuals who were the subjects of FBI investigations. Not all were in flight training. Several were aeronautical engineering students, and one was studying international aviation security. One of the individuals under investigation was the primary focus of the Phoenix EC.
Subra.
That individual was a member of the Al-Muhajirun, whose spiritual leader was a strong supporter of bin Laden and who had issued a number of fatwas against the United States, one mentioning airports as a possible target. The subject of the Phoenix investigation was taking aviation-related security courses. As a member of the Al-Muhajirun, he was organizing anti-U.S. and anti-Israeli rallies and calling for jihad. The investigation of this individual led to the opening of investigations on 6 of his associates, also involved in aviation training. We asked the Phoenix agent whether he had received any intelligence from FBI headquarters or from other intelligence community agencies that contributed to the suspicions he raised in the EC. According to the agent, the Phoenix office did not receive FBI, intelligence community, or foreign intelligence service products on a regular basis. He told us that he believes that prior to September 11, 2001, the FBI was not running counterterrorism as a national level program. He often has felt that he's, quote, out on an island, close quote, in Phoenix. He said that prior to headquarters downsizing, the FBI used to do a better job of disseminating intelligence products to the field. He does not believe that sufficient resources are devoted to counterterrorism, even though it is officially a Tier 1 program.
Yeah.
In his words, counterterrorism and counterintelligence have always been considered, quote, bastard stepchild of the FBI, because these programs do not generate the statistics that other programs do. The Phoenix EC requested that FBI
That's true, by the way. You have to understand that, for example, New York counterterrorism unit will always get better or more apt to get funding from FBI headquarters in regards to a budget to certain areas. One of them is counterterrorism, Arab fundamentalism, right? As opposed to like Phoenix. Now, Phoenix will have better funding than, say, I don't know, Los Angeles, for example, because Phoenix has a history of, connections between the 1993 World Trade Center bombing, such as Wadi al-Hajj and al-Qaeda links. But New York is the preeminent city. Arizona doesn't have a very big office either, as compared to New York City FBI field headquarters. So it really all depends on the supervisors and how much pull they have, and a need for a specific amount of money for a budget that goes into a specific field. So, there's a lot of factors to take to take into effect, actually, regarding funding?
Consider implementing 4 recommendations. 1, headquarters should accumulate a list of civil aviation university colleges around the country. 2, FBI offices should establish liaison with those schools. 3, headquarters should discuss the Phoenix theories with the intelligence community. And 4, headquarters should consider seeking authority to obtain visa information on individuals seeking to attend flight schools. On July 30th, 2001, an intelligence assistant in the Radical Fundamentalist Unit, or RFU, at FBI headquarters assigned the lead on the Phoenix EC to an intelligence operations specialist. The RFU IOS, in turn, contacted an IOS, intelligence operations specialist, in the Osama bin Laden unit to effect a transfer. The UBLU IOS then consulted 2 other operations specialists, intelligence operations specialists, in her unit. Their discussions centered on the legality of the visa information proposal and whether it raised profiling issues. On August 7, 2001, the EC was forwarded to an intelligence analyst in the Portland office, stating that the document, quote, basically puts forth a theory on individuals being directed to come here to study aviation and their ties to extremists. Nothing concrete or whatever, but some very interesting coincidences. I thought it would be interesting to you, considering some of the stuff you were coming up with in PD, Portland. Let me know if anything strikes you, close quote. The Portland analyst has said that she had spoken to the IOS at the UBL unit on several occasions about the aviation-related ties of terrorist subjects in the Portland and Seattle areas. She did not take action on the communication or disseminate it any further, as it was only sent to her for informational purposes. On August 7, 2001, both IOSs decided that the lead should be closed. In the electronic system, the RFU IOS noted that the lead was, quote, covered, consulted with UBLU, no action at this time, will reconvene on this issue, close quote. The UBLU IOS maintains that she fully intended to return to the project once she had time to do additional research, but that September 11th occurred, and she had not yet had an opportunity to do so. Both IOSs also said that they considered assigning the Phoenix project to a headquarters analytic unit, but decided against it. In an interview with a supervisory agent in the UBLU, the staff was told that the EC should have been assigned to an analytic unit because it was a long-term, labor-intensive suggestion, and that analytic units would have more time to devote to it than the operational units. The chiefs of both the RFU and the UBLU informed the staff that they did not see the Phoenix communication prior to September 11th.
That's right.
Moreover, neither remembers even hearing about the flight school issue until after September 11th. The manner in which FBI headquarters...
Which, by the way, that would mean that the Bajinka plot dossier did not reach these people either, which should have been disseminated throughout FBI headquarters nationwide.
Handled the Phoenix EC provides a valuable window into the FBI's operational environment prior to September 11th and illustrates several procedural weaknesses that have been recognized and are currently being addressed. The manner in which the EC was handled demonstrated how strategic analysis took a back seat to operational priorities prior to September 11. That many in the U.S. government believed an attack of some type was imminent in the summer of 2001 apparently only served to further de-emphasize strategic analysis. For example, the IOS handling the Phoenix EC was primarily concerned with an individual in the EC who was connected to individuals arrested overseas. The IOS paid less attention to the flight school theories. For his part, the RFU chief said he was seeing about 100 pieces of mail daily and could not keep up. His solution was to assign the review of intelligence reports to his iOS. Even the analytic unit responsible for strategic analysis was largely producing tactical products to satisfy the operational section. In fact, there was no requirement to handle projects with nationwide impact, such as Phoenix, any different than any other project. This now has been changed. Any lead of the type, such as Phoenix, represented must now be raised to the section chief level. The handling of the Phoenix EC also exposed information sharing problems between FBI headquarters elements. A number of analysts commented that the UBLU and the RFU frequently do not share information with the International Terrorism Analytic Unit. Had the project been transferred to the analytic unit, the capability to conduct strategic analysis on Al-Qaeda was limited because 5 of the unit's analysts had transferred into operational units. The handling of the Phoenix EC also illustrates the extent to which technological limitations affect information flow at the FBI. A number of individuals who were addressees on the EC stated that they did not see it prior to September 11th. The FBI's electronic system is not designed to ensure that all addressees on a communication actually receive it. Furthermore,
Right, she's right here, because when it's faxed, this Central Intelligence Report, CIR, is only going to the people outlined in the heading, okay? And they have phone numbers, it's faxed just to them. Now, whether they see it, because it could just sit there, it depends. Whether it's information or is it a criminal investigation? Is it information only? There's a couple of variables that play here. Whether they can act on the information, and like Eleanor Hill said, these guys, FBI, basically are awash with data and intelligence coming in from everywhere. And basically, this is the reason why the FBI was not kept up to pace regarding Al-Qaeda operatives inside the United States. Thank you, CIA and NSA, as well as the Saudis and Israelis who didn't share their intelligence about known Al-Qaeda operative rings in the U.S. in the year 2000, 2001, as well as the Able Danger Program, which was ordered, the information ordered to be destroyed. This is where the crux of 9/11 is, right here, pre-intelligence, 9/11. This is it. What was said on those phone calls regarding Bin Laden's satellite phone that the NSA heard, or the Al-Qaeda communications hub in Yemen. What data was collected by the Able Danger Program regarding terrorist cells inside the United States. What human actionable intelligence was collected by the CIA regarding Khalid al-Mihdhar, Nawaf Hazmi inside the United States, and Hani Hanjour. What actionable intelligence was collected by the Saudis and Israelis and their large foreign operation rings on the East Coast and the Southwest? Well, we'll never know, because the Saudis and Israelis were all deported when they were detained by the FBI. And not only that, the players involved with pre-intelligence regarding the CIA and NSA, well, they classified the intelligence. So we'll never know unless it comes out 30, 40 years through a FOIA request to the National Archives.
the system is capable of recognizing units only if they are precisely designated.
Look, I'll just come right out and say it right now. If we're not paying attention to this right here, because this is the crux of 9/11, this is it. Either they covered up the fact that they were inside this country and that they didn't want the FBI to tail them because they would have interfered with the attacks, or that they would have interfered with a covert operation to turn them. It doesn't matter, because the CIA is complicit with malfeasance, and they weren't even charged with that. Nobody was fired. If 9/11 can't be used as a justification for holding people accountable within our domestic agencies, what makes you think we can get to the Saudis or Israelis? Because if you're out there believing that there are no hijackers and hijacked planes, well, guess what? You're helping these people regarding pre-intelligence and keeping it locked away for the next 30, 40 years. Thanks to you. Maybe that's the reason why the truth movement was infiltrated by these people at a very early stage. So they don't talk about this, for example. This right here. Pre 9/11 actionable intelligence, which could have prevented 9/11. Now, I put out a video yesterday regarding a Thomas Drake, the former senior executive of the NSA and one of the most important whistleblowers of our time, where he basically went on Boiling Frogs Post, interviewed by Peter B. Collins in 2013, and said that the NSA had collected so much data on Al Qaeda through the Thin Thread program that if shared with anybody, could have stopped 9/11 altogether just on that information alone. Is anybody talking about it? No, because the media sure ain't bringing it up. The State Department sure won't be forthcoming about it. And the truth movement, you would think they bring it up? No, because they don't believe in hijackers.
Section. Otherwise, a unit would not receive the communication. In fact, the electronic system was considered so unreliable that many FBI personnel, both at the field offices and at headquarters, used email instead. Several FBI personnel interviewed conceded that it was possible that routine leads on which there was no direct communication were falling through the cracks. The Joint Inquiry staff has been informed that the FBI recently determined that there are 68,000 outstanding and unassigned leads assigned to the Counterterrorism Division dating back to 1995. Since many FBI personnel have not been using the electronic system for these purposes, it is difficult to know how many of these leads have actually been completed.
Wow, what an astounding number, right? Now, what does that mean? Well, that can mean anything because we don't know what's in those leads, right? Were they talking about, was it talking about the USS Cole? Were they talking about Cobra Towers? Were they talking about the U.S. Embassy bombings? I'm not talking about the incidents because they came later, but they could have been talking about it. They could have been talking about the operatives who were involved with those operations, pre those operations. So what actual intelligence they have regarding those operatives, we won't know. That's an enormous amount of data.
We are told that the Counterterrorism Division's management is currently looking into this situation.
And by the way, this is a 2003 video. Yeah, nothing's come of it 19 years later.
FBI officials have noted, both in public statements and in congressional testimony, that the September 11th hijackers
I'm sorry, this is a 2000. I have to apologize. This is a 2002 video. That's 20 years later.
Anyone of investigative interest. However, there is some evidence that hijacker Hani Hanjour, who was unknown to the intelligence community and law enforcement agencies prior to September 11th, 2001, was an associate of an individual mentioned in the Phoenix EC. This individual had been engaged in flight training in the United States. And
now, a little bit of history, because I mentioned this before. The information in the Phoenix memo, a lot of it came through an informant of Ken Williams, and his name was Henry Yellen, and he was a Muslim convert, and his name was Ibrahim or something like that. Yusuf, I think. I can't remember his Muslim name, but he passed away. And, there was a lot of actual intelligence that he gave Ken Williams. And, Ken Williams drafted that memo regarding, terrorist operatives who were at flight schools in Scottsdale. The climate is hot, which Arabs like, and there's more flight instructor schools in Arizona than any other state.
FBI believed that he was possibly a radical fundamentalist. The FBI believes that as early as 1997, Hanjour and the individual named in the Phoenix EC trained together at a flight school in Arizona. Several instructors at the flight school say that they were associates, and one thinks they may have carpooled together. The FBI has confirmed at least 5 occasions when the Phoenix subject and Hanjour were at the flight school on the same day. On one occasion in 1999, the flight school logs indicate that Hanjour and this individual used the same plane. According to the flight instructor, the individual mentioned in the EC was there as an observer. The rules of the school were such that for this individual to observe, Hanjour would have had to approve of his presence in the aircraft. Another individual informed the FBI that this individual named in the EC and Hanjour knew each other, both from flight training and through a religious center in Arizona. The FBI's evidence linking the two in the summer of 2001 is not as strong. The FBI has located records from the flight school in Phoenix indicating that on one day in June 2001, Hanjour and several other individuals signed up to use the Cessna simulator. The next day, the 2 individuals who signed up with Hanjour the previous day came to the facility with the individual mentioned in the Phoenix EC. Another employee of the flight school has placed Hanjour and the individual together during that time frame, although she was not completely confident in her identification. The FBI attempted to investigate this individual in May of 2001, but discovered that he was out of the country. The FBI was apparently unaware that he had returned to the United States soon after and may have been associating with Hanjour and several other Islamic extremists. A Phoenix agent told the staff that had the individual been in the country in May 2001, they would have opened an investigation. However, the Phoenix office generally did not open investigations on individuals who they believed had permanently left the United States. The Phoenix office also did not notify the INS, State Department, or the CIA of their interest in this individual. No one can say whether the FBI would have developed an investigative interest in Hanjour had they opened an investigation on the individual mentioned in the Phoenix EC prior to September 11th. If the hijackers were, in fact, associating with individuals of investigative interest, there are more significant questions as to whether or not they should have come to the FBI's attention prior to the attacks. These associations continue to raise questions about the FBI's knowledge and understanding of the radical fundamentalist network in the United States prior to September 11th. The Phoenix EC
They
was
had to have
not...
been, listen, they had to have been aware of this. Because we're talking about a history, 10-year history almost, regarding Arab fundamentalism. That's 93 to 2001, the summer, okay? It's 8 years. Now, of course, the FBI in New York basically said after the arrests of everybody from the Landmarks plot, which was an extension of the 93 World Trade Center bombing, said, oh, there is no further cell, there is no cell inside the United States. We caught everybody. But, you know, there were FBI agents who didn't believe that. One of them was Frank Pellegrino, New York office, who connected the dots himself regarding Khalid Sheikh Mohammed and the 93 bombing, because he sent a check, a $5,000 check to one of the 93 co-conspirators, Mohammed Salame, through a Western Union wire transfer. And, you know, people in New York agents at New York agency thought, you know, he was chasing a ghost with Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, but he was right. He was right. There's a fireman named Ronnie Bucca who got involved with investigating the radical fundamentalist cell. DJ Thermal Detonator, who's going to be working on the revisit or rework film of 1993, The Hidden Clues, which will air in about a month and a half from now. Oh, he has that going up. I think it's 43 days from now. There's going to be seen where he goes into that uh, in depth. And the only other people I know that do that are Peter Lance and Paul Thompson.
The first occasion that the FBI had been concerned about terrorist groups sending individuals to the United States for aviation study. Neither the individual involved in drafting the Phoenix EC nor the FBI personnel who worked on it at headquarters were aware of this broader context. In March 1983, the INS published a rule in the Federal Register terminating the non-immigrant status of Libyan nationals or individuals acting on behalf of Libyan entities engaged in aviation or nuclear-related education. The INS turned to the FBI for assistance in locating any such individuals. In May 1983, FBI headquarters sent a, quote, priority, close quote, communication to all field offices, asking them for assistance in complying with the INS request. The Joint Inquiry staff has not been able to locate all of the relevant records, so it is not clear how many students the FBI located and deported. In 1998, the chief pilot of the FBI's Oklahoma City field office contacted an agent on the counterterrorism squad to inform him that he had observed large numbers of Middle Eastern males at Oklahoma flight schools. An intra-office communication to the counterterrorism squad noted the chief pilot's concern that the aviation education might be related to planned terrorist activity, and his speculation that light planes would be an ideal means of spreading chemical or biological agents. The communication was sent to the office's Weapons of Mass Destruction control file. It appears to have been for informational purposes only. There is no indication that any follow-up action was either requested or conducted. The FBI also received reporting in 1998 that a terrorist organization might be planning to bring students to the United States for training at flight schools. The FBI was aware that individuals connected to the organization had performed surveillance and security tests at U.S. airports and made comments suggesting an intention to target civil aviation. There is no indication that the organization actually followed through on their plans. In 1999, reporting was received that yet another terrorist organization was planning to send students to the United States for aviation training. The purpose of this training was unknown, but the terrorist organization leaders viewed the requirement as being, quote, particularly important, close quote, and were reported to have approved an open-ended amount of funding to ensure its success. In response, an operational unit in the counterterrorism section at FBI headquarters sent a communication to all 24 field offices, asking them to pay close attention to Islamic students in their area from the target country who were engaged in aviation training. The communication requested that field offices, quote, task sources coordinate with the INS and conduct other logical inquiries in an effort to develop an intelligence baseline, close quote, regarding this terrorist group's use of students. To date, we have found no indication that the FBI field offices conducted any investigation after receiving the communication. In November 1999, the FBI sent a letter to INS explaining the intelligence and requesting a database search for individuals studying in the United States from the target country.
This is called the tip-off database that they look for people that are suspected of being involved with terrorist organizations, and that this is passed on to the FAA, for example. Hey, by the way, don't allow these people on the plane, or red flag these people, whatnot, put them through, stricter security screening, or blacklist them. Can't fly. Now, according to the FBI, it basically was very little amount because what they didn't want to do was offend the relations of the Saudi and U.S. government. And this is, a big problem because in 99, 2000, you have what was called the Visa Express program, where they were trying to fast track Saudi students who come to the United States and study here. And even if they had, questionable backgrounds, maybe they were coming from Afghanistan, which was suspected of them going to camps, or that they don't know where they're going, for example, leave their applications unchecked or unanswered, they can be, fast tracked through. It's what's called the Visa Express program. I did a podcast called Shina Steiger, how the 9/11 hijackers got their visas. And I covered about this extensively.
To interviews, the INS never provided any information in response to the request. The project was subsequently assigned to the International Terrorism Analytic Unit at FBI headquarters. The analyst assigned to the project determined that there were 75 academic institutions offering flight education in the United States and an additional 1,000 flight schools. In November 2000, the analyst sent a communication to the FBI field offices informing them that no information was uncovered concerning this terrorist group's recruitment of students studying aviation, and stated that, quote, further investigation by FBI field office is deemed imprudent, close quote, by FBI headquarters. The former unit chief of the operational unit involved in this project told the Joint Inquiry staff that he was not surprised by the apparent lack of vigorous investigative action by the field offices. In his opinion, the field offices did not like to undertake difficult, labor-intensive projects like this with a high risk of failure. He told us that the FBI's culture often prevented headquarters from forcing field offices to take investigative action that they were unwilling to take. The Phoenix EC was also sent to 2 investigators in the FBI's New York field office who specialize in Osama bin Laden cases. They were asked to, quote, read and clear, close quote, but were not asked to take any follow-up action. A Joint Inquiry staff audit of electronic records shows that at least 3 people in New York saw the EC prior to September 11th. It does not appear to have received much attention or elicited much concern.
Let me guess, John O'Neill, Jack Clunan. I don't know who the other one could have been. Yeah, I don't know.
2 of the 3 do not recall the communication prior to September 11th. The third remembered reading it, but said it did not resonate with him because he found it speculative.
Yeah, that's the guy I remember. Damn it. Was that Clunan? That could have been Clunan. It wasn't John O'Neill. But yeah, it was either Clunan or John Antisev. No, not Antisev. Clunan, I-49 unit, I think. I want to say that was it. In fact, that's important because you know what? I'll look it up. Geez. I'll make sure, and we'll keep playing.
The New York agents stated that they were well aware that Middle Eastern men frequently came to the United States for flight training. A communication noting that Middle Eastern men with ties to bin Laden were receiving flight training in the United States would not necessarily be considered particularly alarming because New York personnel knew that individuals connected to al-Qaeda had previously received flight training in the United States. In fact, one of these individuals trained at the Airman Flight School in Norman, Oklahoma, the same place where Zacharias Moussaoui trained prior to his arrival in Minnesota. Mohammed Atta and another of the hijackers visited this same flight school but decided not to enroll there. The commonly held view at the FBI prior to September 11th was that bin Laden needed pilots to operate aircraft he had purchased in the United States to move men and material. Mr. Chairman, I also will now turn to the investigation by the FBI of Zacharias Moussaoui. Zacharias
All right, you know what? I
Moussaoui-
could cut it off here because, I've covered Zacharias Moussaoui extensively, and, we don't need to really rehash and keep repeating same old things. Just want to do a short breakdown on this. I didn't want to go through the whole 54 minutes. It's too long. I don't want to cut down on long videos too, like hour and a half, 2 hours, because I do a lot of those, but um, I want to try and shorten the videos as well. But you get the gist, and you know, I do a lot of these breakdown videos because really nobody does them, right? And I want to try and fill in the blanks or fill in the dots regarding these investigations, whether it's 9/11 Commission or the Joint House Inquiry, because a lot of information is missing and you may not be privy to it. Now, I've studied 9/11 and 1993 World Trade Center bombing extensively, and so has DJ Thelma Detonator. But hardly anyone does these breakdown videos. In fact, I'm probably the first person to ever come up with this idea of, aiding the viewer regarding these investigations. Um, and I think it's important because people need to see these investigations for what it is. Now, you may hear like, oh, the 9/11 Commission report is wrong. Joint House Inquiry, it's all a cover up. Basically, they couldn't tell you what was in it, right? It's important to read these things. It's important to watch these things and listen to these people. And, not everything they say is a lie, but not everything they say is truthful. A lot of the stuff wasn't investigated properly, and a lot of information was classified from them, even state secrets, and a lot wasn't investigated. A lot wasn't. And I'm hoping to fill in those blanks where it can make some sense to each breakdown video I make. And, it brings me pleasure to do it because I want to see an educated public regarding these matters. And that's the only way we're ever going to make real change.